Saint Joan of Arc, whose feast day is May 30th, inspired the French in battle against the English in the 15th century and was subsequently executed as a heretic. But who was this illiterate French peasant girl who in 15 months changed the history of Western Europe and became, according to one historian, the most widely known of all medieval women? Joan was born into the midst of the 100 Years' War, a conflict that actually lasted 116 years, from 1337 to 1453. On January 6, 1412, Joan of Arc was born to pious parents of the French peasant class in a small village named Domremy near the province of Lorraine. Her father was a farmer who owned a small piece of land. Joan's 3 brothers helped their father on the farm, while Joan helped her mother at home. She was not taught to read or write, but her pious mother, Isabelle Romay, instilled in her a deep love for the Catholic Church and its teachings. Never wandering far from home, Joan took care of the animals and became quite skilled as a seamstress. When Joan was about 13 years old, she began receiving visions of Saint Michael the Archangel, Saint Catherine of Alexandria, and Saint Margaret the Virgin. In 1424, when Joan was only 12 years old, the great miracle of her life unfolded. One summer day, in her father's garden, she heard a mysterious voice which was accompanied by a bright light. At first, they gave her simple messages. Do good, they told her. Don't forget to go to church. Slowly, Joan began to recognize them. One was the Archangel Michael, the leader of God's armies. And with him were Saint Margaret of Antioch and Saint Catherine of Alexandria. As she recognized them, their bodies began to change. Instead of just telling her to be good, they told her that she was destined to play a part in a vast drama. It was her job, they told her, to lead the French army against the English.
I don't know anything about war.
That doesn't matter, the voices told her. This is God's will. After their messages were delivered and the saints departed, Joan cried.
They were so beautiful.
As part of this divine mission, Joan took a vow of chastity. At the age of 16, after her father attempted to arrange a marriage for her, she successfully convinced him that she should not be forced to marry. By the time she was 16, she approached a local garrison commander and told him that she wanted to meet the king. He flatly ordered, "Give her a good slapping and take her back to her father," and sent her home. Joan returned home that day sadly. But one day, she received another vision from the angels. The angel told her to visit the garrison once again and deliver the message that the French army would lose the Battle of Rouvray. The Battle of Rouvray was being fought far away, and everyone in France expected their army to win this. Nobody knew what had happened there yet, because the messengers from the battle hadn't arrived yet.
The French have lost the Battle of Rouvray. You need to take me to the king.
The garrison didn't trust Joan yet, and he waited for the messengers to arrive. The messengers arrived the next day. The battle at Rouvray had been a disaster for the French. There was no way on earth Joan could have known that, but somehow she did. He concluded she had seen them losing by divine revelation, which caused him to believe her words. he gave her the permission to meet the King Charles. To reach the king's palace, Joan would have to travel through a hostile territory for many days. Garrison gave her a horse and 2 escorts to assist her in the journey. Joan cropped her hair and dressed in men's clothes for her 11-day journey across enemy territory to Chinon. After many days of journey, Joan arrived at her destination. The king, Charles, wasn't eager to meet with this strange girl when she arrived. He kept Joan waiting for 2 days. Then he put on a disguise of his own so she wouldn't be able to tell that he was the king when she came into court. But despite the fact that the room was full of people and Charles wasn't dressed as a king, Joan walked right up to him. The two had a private conversation, during which it is said Joan revealed details of a solemn prayer Charles had made to God to save France. Still tentative, Charles had prominent theologians examine her. The clergyman reported they found nothing improper with Joan, only piety, chastity, and humility. Finally, Charles allowed the 17-year-old Joan of Arc to take part in the battle. Charles gave Joan a horse and a suit of white armor. He also provided a special standard bearing the names Jesus and Mary. He tried to give her a sword as well, but the voices that spoke in Joan's mind told her not to take it. There, just as the voices had said, Joan found a buried sword. Joan rode to the battle dressed in armor along with the soldiers. During the 5 months prior to Joan's arrival in Orleans, the French had only attempted one offensive assault, which resulted in their defeat. But after her arrival, things began to change. During the battle for the fort of Les Tourelles, Joan was wounded. She quickly returned to the fight, carrying the banner, and her courage and bravery inspired the French soldiers. In one of the visions before, Joan had foreseen the victory of the French army. And just as the visions predicted, 9 days after Joan took the field, the English fled and the French won the battle in Orleans. Several noblemen claimed she greatly affected the soldiers, as they accepted she was giving divinely inspired advice. Her renown spread. She was perhaps the most famous person in Europe. Joan urged the immediate coronation of the king, but the French leaders dragged their feet. Finally, however, at Reims in July 1429, Charles VII was anointed King of France. The Maid of Orleans stood triumphantly at his side. Joan had accomplished her mission, but once the king was crowned, he wasn't as eager to listen to Joan. Without the backing of the king, Joan was unable to get the support she needed to fight the war. In May 1430, an Anglo-Burgundian force laid siege to the town of Compiègne. Joan, with no more than a few hundred men, rushed to its aid. Her voices had told her a few months before that she would soon be captured by the English, but she went to the town's defense anyways. The Anglo-Burgundian force was far larger than her own, and she tried her best to defeat them. But in a few days, the enemy chased her small army away. Although most of her soldiers managed to escape, Joan herself was captured by the enemy troops. The English were thrilled to discover that they had Joan in their clutches. But she didn't make it easy for them. She made several attempts to escape from the prison. When they put her in a 70-foot tower, she jumped out of it. But each time she escaped, the English captured her again, until they finally put her on trial in the town of Rouen. They could not execute Joan for winning, but they could impose capital punishment for sorcery or heresy. For several months, she was chained in a cell in the castle at Rouen, where cruel guards constantly taunted her. In the meantime, King Charles VII did almost nothing to secure her release. At her trial, the church judges, who were English, tried to trick her with difficult theological questions. "Are you in God's grace?" they asked her. Joan couldn't say yes, because no one can claim that they know what God thinks. And she couldn't say no, because then she would condemn herself.
If I'm not, may God put me there. And if I am, may God keep me there.
Joan baffled them with her answers. But even after this, they condemned her to die at the stake. Joan was charged with heresy, witchcraft, and dressing like a man. Yes, that last charge alleged that Joan's cross-dressing violated divine law. The first time the soldiers led her out to be killed, Joan's courage failed in the public square. Had it really been God who spoke to her? Did she believe in what she had heard enough to die?
I take it all back. Just don't kill me.
3 days later, however, she was found wearing men's clothes again, and when asked about it, she said the voices of Catherine and Margaret had censured her for her treason. They decided that she had fallen back into error. Joan, her strength renewed, declared that God had truly commissioned her and that her voices had come from Him. So, just 7 days after her trial, when Joan was only 19 years old, she was tied to a pillar in the marketplace, wearing a long white dress. She knelt and prayed for her enemies, then asked 2 priests to hold a crucifix for her to see. She then mounted the prepared pyre. As the fire was lit and spread, she uttered her last words. She said,
Jesus, Jesus, Jesus,
repeating Christ's name several times before her death. And as the fire engulfed her, an English soldier saw a white bird rise up out of the pyre. Her ashes were scattered in the Seine River. The 100 Years' War would drag on, but Joan's martyrdom helped spur the French to eventually drive the English out of most of France. Charles VII, perhaps feeling some well-deserved guilt, procured a trial review years later that nullified Joan's guilty verdict. After 25 years, the Church Commission overturned the charges against her and declared her innocent. In 1920, Joan, remembered for her heroism and devotion far more than her military and political conquests, was canonized a saint by the Roman Catholic Church.